Hey folks, this is Heaving Bosoms, the podcast where two best friends recap romance novels while giggling, snorting, going on tangents, and being super awesome. We're going to start off with a Patreon shout out. Kelli T, you are a bunyip, a water spirit native to Australia that takes the form of a giant starfish, swimming dog, a long-necked creature with a seal-like head, a nautical emu with feathers and claws, or a large alligator that swims like a frog. Look, it seems like you pretty much look like whatever you want. Some say you eat crayfish, others say you eat humans. You live in rivers, swamps, lakes, and the ocean. Sometimes you live on land. Basically, you do whatever you want to, and don't let anyone else define what you look like, what you eat, or where you live. You are a boss bitch living your best life, bunyip, and don't ever forget it. And now we have a special treat. Bea Koch joins me to talk all about her debut book and recap the movie Belle. Links to her book and social media will be in the episode notes. And patrons, you can expect a bonus interview and maybe an outtake or two in the Patreon feed. All right, let's jump in. Hi, Bea. Oh my gosh. Hello.
Hello.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Listener, you missed out. I didn't press recording, and so you missed out on so much wonderful banter before we even started recording. I am so excited for this episode. Bea and I are twins, and we have very similar love stories, and we're basically long-lost soul sisters, and I'm super stoked about it. So welcome!
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm glad that you seem to not mind my tangents. My sister and I sometimes joke that if we had podcasts, it would be called We've Wandered Off the Subject. Because
that's perfect.
Stay on.
At one point, we got one bad review at one point, and by bad review, I mean like 3 stars. And it was like, hey, y'all, can you like stick to the book recaps? And so we floated it to the listeners. We were like, what do you guys think? And there was an upheaval. They were like, banter and tangents is what we are here for.
That's really the process of talking about a book with a friend. Like, you don't want to just talk about the book. I've been in a book club for most of my life. We rarely actually talk about the book.
It's true. But we do want to talk about your book because Miss Bea Koch is a debut author.
Crazy. It's really wild.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, it is like the craziest thing. I cannot believe it's actually here. And it feels even crazier because it was supposed to be here in June and then it got delayed because of the pandemic. And
Right.
So it feels even more surreal. I have wanted to write a book for as long as I can remember. And this book for a really long time as well in some form. So it's pretty unbelievable to me that it'll be in people's hands soon.
Well, and I love it because you're one half owner of The Ripped Bodice, the very first romance-only bookstore in North America.
Cool. But now we have Love Sweet Arrow. So we have a buddy in the romance selling world.
Yeah, we've got Love Sweet Arrow in Chicago. But
my hometown. It's very exciting.
Oh, really? I didn't know
that.
That's really cool. But what I love about the book is just that I feel like you're very well positioned, being one of the owners and obviously very devoted to romance, to write a book that's all about like real people in the Regency. You know, like to take the heroines that everyone has been inspired by and bring them to our delight.
Yes, I feel like people would come into the bookstore all the time and I'd be like, oh, I want a Regency romance. And what do you recommend? And I would recommend many different books, but a lot of times Tessa Dare A Week to Be Wicked, because it is one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, that's her road trip romance, right?
Yes, the road trip romance. And
the
heroine wants to be a paleontologist.
Yes, and they're going to the Scottish Society of Dinosaur Lovers or whatever.
Exactly. They're going to talk at an academic conference, or she wants to go present at an academic conference.
Yeah.
And Tessa included, I think there's an author's note, I'm positive there's an author's note, where she talks about Mary Anning, who was a real life person who sold fossils in the Regency. And Tessa was inspired by Mary.
Yeah.
And when I would recommend that book to people, I would tell them like, oh, she wants to be a paleontologist. And people would just like burst out laughing. And I'll be like, oh my God, that's so ridiculous. Like, it's so inaccurate.
Oh, romance novels. They're just pure fantasy.
Exactly. Like, what fantasy? And it's like, well, there's a lot that's fantasy in a romance novel, but that part isn't.
Yeah.
That part is real. I was like, wait, no, what? Oh. So that was one of the things that kind of stuck in my mind.
Right.
And I was like, oh, there definitely is a market here for people who are just like kind of casual romance readers and not super familiar with the history of the Regency, to introduce them to all these groundbreaking women who may have inspired romance novels and may not yet have inspired romance novels, but certainly should inspire romance novels.
And
yes, exactly.
Will.
Fingers crossed. Nothing would bring me more joy than someone saying, I read Mad and Bad, I was inspired by X woman, and then I wrote a romance novel. That would be my true dream.
Right? Oh my gosh. And I really, really love the fact that you've sort of made sure to bring other voices out of history that are often ignored, because there's a whole chapter on queer women. There's a whole chapter on women of color. There's a whole chapter on Jewish women back in the Regency. It's so cool, plus the scientists, plus everybody else.
Yeah. And I think what's also really cool is that those, the scientists, like a lot of those chapters intersect in ways that I didn't even really, I struggled to kind of make those connections, but a lot of women who are in one chapter could actually be in like 2 or 3 chapters.
Absolutely.
Which I think is something that I would love to discuss more in a further edition of Mad and Bad.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had never heard of I hope I'm saying this correctly, Mary Seacole. Mm-hmm. But she was a nurse alongside Florence Nightingale.
I think Mary Seacole is a perfect example. If you are kind of like, oh, I'm a student of history. Like I seek out my own sources, and of Florence Nightingale, but you don't know of Mary Seacole. That's like an excellent way to check the sources you are engaging with.
Ooh.
Because I think Mary Seacole, for any number of reasons, but mostly racism.
Oh, yeah.
Has been kind of like downgraded in her contributions to nursing. And in particular, like people who considered themselves like Florence Nightingale scholars think that by discussing Mary Seacole's achievements, we're somehow taking something away from Florence Nightingale.
Yeah.
Ooh. And that really upsets me, because I think that is just a perfect encapsulation of the way women are treated by history. It's like only one. Like, why couldn't there be 2?
That's a really good point. Well, yeah. And when I read that chapter, I felt like you did such a good job of parsing that out. And not only like there can only be one woman, but also the idea, what I got from it at least, is the idea that we're so scared of our privilege being taken away. And so, you talk in the chapter about how educational systems, I can't remember which ones, were like, we can't talk about Mary Seacole because that'll take away from Florence Nightingale. And it's as if like we cannot talk about a woman of color doing the same thing as a white woman, even though like they're contemporaries who did the same work.
There's also like Mary Seacole was more entrepreneurial in her nursing endeavors. Like she had a business along with her nursing, and Florence Nightingale was sent to the Crimean War front by the government. Right. So like even in that way, they literally had like different levels of like systemic help in what they were doing.
Yep,
and then like history has kind of turned around and like punished Mary for building this business so that she could help people, because Florence wouldn't let her join her band of nurses. Like, and that's the other thing. Like, a lot of people will say, well, Florence Nightingale wasn't racist to Mary Seacole. That's fucking bullshit. Florence Nightingale was racist to Mary Seacole, and Mary Seacole wrote about it in her goddamn autobiography, in her own autobiography. Like, it's infuriating when you see people being like, well, Florence Nightingale was nice. No.
Yeah.
Florence Nightingale would not let Mary Seacole join her nursing brigade. And like, that's it was pure racism.
Right. Because she was turned away multiple times. And then just had to go off and like do her own thing and raise the funds on her own.
She went to Crimea herself.
Right.
And was like, I'm here. I got myself here. You don't need to pay for me to come. I'm here to help.
Right.
And still
got turned away. Yeah.
So Mary Seacole is like just such a fascinating character. And the way the British curriculum has engaged with her, like you said, they like a couple of years ago, they were like, oh, we don't have time for Mary Seacole. We've got to spend more time on Winston Churchill.
Because he does not get enough time.
I'm sorry. Gosh. I'm an American and I'm like, y'all can't stop talking about fucking Winston Churchill. Get over it, man. Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
There was a huge uproar and they walked it back. And they were like, no, Mary Seacole can stay. Then, like, talk about, the thing about the racist statues being thrown in the river, which is great. And people are like, well, why don't you put up your own statues? Don't throw these statues away. It's like, okay, we did. They tried to put up a statue of Mary Seacole, and a bunch of fucking people protested. Sorry for screaming.
No, please scream. It deserves to be screamed about.
This statue of a woman who did so much for the British soldiers.
Over and over again.
Over and over again.
And
seriously,
she's such a tale of like rags to riches and pulling the stupid pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. She fucking did it, you guys. Give her some due.
She learned what she needed to learn from anyone who would teach her. Like she would like gain knowledge throughout her whole life. She talked about that, how she was like a student throughout her whole life. And
which is something I deeply love. I love that.
I mean, I think that's like one of the most important things in like a doctor is someone who's willing to see what other cultures are doing and take that in and challenge their own assumptions. And I just think what she writes in her autobiography like shows us such a incredible mind, a beautiful spirit, like so generous and kind and truly like the perfect person to put up a statue.
Yeah, because she's all that and she's not going to take your shit, Florence
No, she's not. She's going to write about it in her autobiography.
And she's going to do it herself. Like,
Mary Seacole is badass.
Absolute badass. And your book is just riddled with real life badasses. And I loved it. Start to finish, man. I loved your book.
Thank you. That really means a lot.
No, thank you. No, honestly, thank you.
People are like, oh, you should be unemotional about your work. I'm like, what would that be like? Okay, cool. How would I
Why would I do that? I want to be passionate about my work.
And this book is very emotional because it is like, it's a love letter to romance and to the way the romance genre has been shining light on the inner lives of women for so long and giving us a way to engage with that. And I think that's so cool.
And validate it.
Absolutely. And make it an important part of the story. And then I think it's also encouraging romance to continue on the trajectory, which I see and I'm very excited about, where we are expanding what we will allow in historical romance and expanding the breadth and depth of stories that we can see.
Absolutely. And not allowing historical accuracy to be used as a bludgeon to keep other stories out.
I was frothing at the mouth the other day, to be honest.
Tell me why.
Oh, I'm not sure if I'm sure many of your listeners saw this. A woman came to tell Adriana Herrera that her beautiful new book, which isn't even out yet, but which the deal was announced. This is a series set in Paris in the late 19th century. And it's Latinx heroines, like heiresses, coming to Paris for the World's Fair.
I cannot tell you, sorry, I'm so sorry to cut in. I cannot tell you how excited I am that Adriana Herrera is starting to write historicals. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I'm so excited. I mean,
I'm so excited for it.
Everything I've ever wanted. And someone was like, oh, this isn't history. Oh my God. I can't even sorry, this is what they said. They said, I wasn't aware of travel between Latin America and Europe in the 19th century.
You're telling on yourself, you dick nose.
It was like, wait, no, stop. What? Just for 1 second.
Yeah.
Think about what you just wrote.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware. Great. Do you want to Google it?
Just real quick. Tippity tap. You just spent all that energy with your thumbs typing that bullshit. You could have been using the Google. Incredible.
It was an interesting, well, I mean, it was a racist. It wasn't interesting. It was racist. And it was very frustrating because I think what a lot of authors of color were saying in their response to it was, this is again and again, we have to defend our right to exist.
Right.
And that it's derailing the conversation. You are continually stopping us from our work.
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely. And
raging.
you know what makes me extra fucking pissed about this whole, subset of, I mean, a lot of times it does come from outside of the community and there's nothing we can do about that. But I am always deeply upset by the people within the romance fandom that pull things like this out, because I'm just like, why are you doing to this author what every other literary genre and the outside world does to romance? Like, I feel like you should understand the frustration of having to be like, romance is valid or this story is valid. You know what I mean? Like, we're always having to defend our romance in general.
Yeah, you would really think that. This. But it's like you're taking something from me, which is such a crazy way to look at it.
Bananas.
And such a waste of time. Your time and this other person's time, which is really what frustrates me when you're wasting someone else's time. With your racism. But yeah, it's just again and again, the historical accuracy question comes up. And I think one way to combat it is just to continue to share stories, like stories of the story of Mary Seacole, the story of Dido Elizabeth Belle, which we will talk about, and I'm so excited. All these women existed and more. It's like, you can say it's not historically accurate, but you're wrong.
Right.
And as you said, telling on yourself.
Yeah.
And it'd be great to see like a deeper level of research come from all this. And I think, and I mean that for white authors, not for authors of color who have been doing research forever.
Yeah. Who have bibliographies for fucking days and they have to include them in their romance novels.
And I love when anyone includes a bibliography because I love reading primary sources.
Sure.
And I especially love Beverly Jenkins bibliographies because I think the way she tells the story of finding the sources is like a beautiful piece of writing in and of itself.
It really is. Yeah.
And it's incredible to see just one thing she finds and then just the story she brings out. I think like it's
masterful.
Like the best of what romance can do. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to see more of it. And I really do think that is coming.
I think so too. And I am really, really, really excited about it. But, we've been talking so much about the fragility of privilege. And we've got a bunch of that in this amazing movie that you introduced me to. Can I talk about the travesty?
Never seen it?
I have never seen it. I don't know what I was doing. Well, honestly, I know what I was doing in 2013. I was paying off a mountain of student debt and I didn't go to the movies. So
well, that is understandable. I also I don't remember I didn't see it in the theaters. I definitely didn't see it in 2013.
Yeah.
But it is such a beautiful.
Oh my gosh. This romance, I was like on my couch, last night watching it again. And my husband was like, he has like this gaming thing that he does on Friday nights. And toward the end, I was just like screaming and I was swooning and I was falling over on the couch. And he was just like giving me these side eyes like, oh, what are you doing over there? I was like, you have no idea.
I mean, the acting, like... Oh.
Yeah, no, Gugu Mbatha Raw is a goddamn revelation in this thing. The things that she can just do with her open eyeballs.
With just one single eyebrow. You're like, what is happening? And it is like that kind of romance to me where you're just like, Like that gasping.
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
Chills for days.
It's so beautifully shot. Like, I also watched it again last night, and I've completely forgotten really the way it was shot. Like, there's scenes where they come through the woods.
Yes.
And they're just like shooting through the leaves. I loved that so much. And I really do think it should be in the canon.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about being beautiful. Like, people always talk about the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice with the fog and the shmur and the beautiful cinematography and the
which and that is true. Love. It's beautiful.
Yes,
gorgeous.
But Jesus Lord, this thing is
so pretty.
Oh my gosh, this movie is gorgeous. Okay, so and it's a big inspire as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's start the recap. Here we go.
Okay,
so clippity-clop, we're in a carriage, everybody.
Which is how most period movies
right
It's like, you gotta get that clippity-clop.
Right. According to Heaving Bosoms, this is in Englandtimes. According to Bea, this is Super Regency. So
this is actually, so the movie starts pre-Regency.
Oh yeah, you're right.
We're Georgian.
I'm gonna leave this to the historian. Where are we?
We're in the Georgian.
Excellent.
We're right before, and that's why, like, the dresses look more like, if people have watched The Duchess with Keira Knightley, that's kind of the style you're seeing with those wider hips, rather than that kind of column dress that we expect in the Regency.
Yes.
So that's correct. Just to give us, and it's also kind of when this whole thing with the British Navy is going on.
With the Zong affair, yeah.
Though, I will say this movie messes up the timing of a bunch of stuff, but that's okay.
Yeah, it felt a little, there were a couple of things that I needed to get with you on. So we'll get there. We'll get there.
I'll happily, I'll check it, but I will, before we do that, here's the caveat. I mentioned the Duchess because the Duchess, I think, is like a really good companion to Belle.
Oh.
Because people knock Belle for historical inaccuracy all the time. And it's like, cool. What about the Duchess? Like, these movies are playing with real life people. So I will happily point out inaccuracies, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy the movie. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, this is inaccurate. I can't stand it. Like, I love the idea of Englandtimes.
Yeah, no, it's still allowed to be fiction. I never understand that. Like, we're still weaving a beautiful tale that comments on the time period in general. And that's not necessarily going to be what a real person's life looked like. Jeez.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, do you really want to watch the real way this went down? Or can we let the filmmaker tell us the story and bring this person into our consciousness? Like, that'd be great. Cool.
Right.
Okay. That's my caveat. Let's go.
Clippity-clop. We're in a carriage, everybody. And this dude, the moment he came on the screen, my notes say, oh, it's that guy.
It's that guy.
Because it's Matthew Good.
That's weird. Oh, him.
Oh, he's here. Excellent. It's Matthew Good.
It's a British period piece.
Yeah.
He's in everything.
It's so true.
I love it.
So Matthew Good is here, and he's here to pick up like a 5 or 6 year old little biracial girl. And
she is so precious.
She's such a little treasure. So he walks in and he goes, oh, she's so much of her mother. And he tells her that he's going to take her to a good life, a life she was born to. And then as they walk out, he's like holding her hand and he's getting these weird looks from people. And I think it's meant to say like people are looking at him and saying, oh, that's him and his slave, right? And then he gets annoyed and picks her up and carries her like one would their daughter, because this little girl is his daughter. And everybody's like sort of scandalized.
People are questioning their relationship. And so that is him indicating exactly as you said, like he's her father and that he is protecting her. And yeah, as you said, people are like, what's going on?
Yeah, people are like, what's good? So then he takes her to this beautiful mansion family estate. And
gorgeous.
He presents her. It is very nice. He presents her to his racist aristocratic family. Because he's in the Navy now and he has to go be a Navy man. But he wants them to raise her as if she were their own, because she is their own. So just to let everybody know, there are terms that are historically accurate that are used in this movie that I personally did not find them triggering. I did often find them offensive, but I'm not going to use any of the words because while they might be historically accurate, I don't feel comfortable with them coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say... It's not the N-word, but it is still, like,
it's
not
bad.
what we would call someone today.
Yeah, no, I'm super not okay with it. So in this scene, they actually do use the word black. They say she's black. And he's like, yes. And they're like, well, you didn't really tell us that before when you were like,
they're
I've
like,
got this daughter.
You left some details out.
Right. Right.
Which, honestly, you're like, dude, why didn't you give them a heads up?
Because I don't think they would have allowed them on the premises. I think you had to spring this on them. I mean, I would prefer it not to happen in front of the impressionable child. But
yeah, that's the part where you're like, ooh, could we do this with her out of the room?
Yeah, like, can you just, like, parade her by and then, like, have a private adult talk? That'd be great. But no,
but I think I think it's good that they showed it that way, kind of, because what I like about Belle is that Belle does not sugarcoat what Dido must have gone through.
Yeah.
In any number of situations. And this is one of them.
I agree with that. They don't sugarcoat, and yet it doesn't feel like exploitative either, which is a lot of times hard line to walk. And this film does it beautifully.
Yeah, it is. And I think to me, that's down to Belle having so much agency. And she is really the mover of her story.
Yeah.
Rather than like other people, which I think is like a really beautiful thing to show.
Right.
I love like the constant choices that she gets to make. This is not one of them. She's still a child at this point, and she's kind of just watching and waiting. But it is a very like jarring scene to see people talk about a child like that.
Yeah, they do ultimately accept her, and they're like, bring her in, let's give her some food. And Matthew Good then kneels down, and I did a big sob, you guys. There was a big cry in the middle of my living room when this happened. Because he said that the Navy isn't fit for someone as precious as her, and that she's going to have a life equal to his blood, and that she won't know it now, but she needs to remember that she is so loved forever and always. And oh boy,
it's real big feels.
It's really nice. And then we get this scene like with the uncle where she's in the portrait gallery and she's seeing.
This is one of my favorites. I just think this movie is like really well done. I'm like, it's so smart. So I think this scene is so important because it sets up the importance of portraiture.
Yes.
And Dido walks into the family portrait gallery and she's looking up at a portrait and she sees a portrait of one of her ancestors portrayed next to a slave. An enslaved person. There's a child.
Right. And of course, there are several in this portrait gallery. And in every one, the enslaved person is looking up with this like adoration and awe at the amazing white person they're standing next to.
Yeah. And I thought that was like, again, like, I think it's showing the racism of Dido's family.
Most definitely.
And where their money came from, which is really important.
Right.
And this is the world she's coming into. So she's looking at that enslaved boy and you can kind of see on her face, she's like, is that a depiction of me? And then Lord Mansfield comes in and kind of starts warming to her.
Well, and I think one of the other things that's really well done in this movie is, you know, obviously, you know, she's biracial. She's going to grow up in this aristocratic family. They are going to genuinely love her, you know, over her lifetime. There is an obvious and deep affection between everyone. But not only does it show the beginnings of her actively trying to figure out where she fits in this family and in this society and how she can navigate this. But then there's this moment with the uncle where he's like, oh, and this is another person. And she says, oh, is that Elizabeth's dad? And he's like, oh, look at you being smart and putting stuff together and like having intellect like a child your age would. You know what I mean? Like, it's very subtle, but you can see him being like, huh. She is like other kids.
Well, the other thing about that is like Dido was her uncle's personal secretary in real life.
Yes. Yeah.
She helped with a lot of his legal work.
Right.
So she was clearly a brilliant, very smart woman. And I loved that they showed that in the movie. I wish they had, we could talk about it later. They don't put her in the position she had in real life as her uncle's secretary. And I thought that was like a real missed opportunity, but
they allude to it.
We can get to that.
There's one line where they allude to it, but it's never shown. You're right.
Yeah. Just when they show her like kind of like going through his papers and even her interaction with the case, she learns about it from John D'Aubigné. Like she in real life probably helped her uncle with that case and with other
like even
with other like that was around the time where she probably would have been.
Yeah, because in this movie it's very important to the uncle that he shield her from this big matter.
Exactly. That's the part. Yes, thank you. That is exactly the part. That's not the way that he
treated her in real life.
Treated her. Yeah. I can't say felt, but like he brought her into his legal work.
So, okay. So then the aunt and uncle are talking, and it's the first time we learn that they think that marriage for her is impossible because they don't want her marrying outside of her rank. And they think that the only person who would be interested in marrying her would not be part of the gentry and would likely also not be white. They don't say that, but that was my take on it. And so they're like, she can't ever be married.
Yeah, there is some kind of implication. Like, I think also that maybe like a fortune hunter would be interested in Dido because of her family's connection, but her like race. I think that's part of also what they're implying. Just that he might be like unsuitable for any number of reasons.
Sure.
But try to gain entry into their family by marrying her.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. They grow up super happy, and then flash forward, she's now like just about of age.
Oh, yes, because did we say that they are also raising Dido's cousin, Elizabeth?
Oh, yeah.
So there's two little girls living at Kenwood, which is the Mansfield house. And they're both like wards of the Mansfields.
Right. So they're essentially growing up as sisters. They are cousins. Yes. And actually there's this moment where the aunt says like, well, I guess we can just tell everybody that we got Elizabeth like a playmate. And the uncle's like, no. We're going to tell people that she's our family, though. So yeah, that was sort of a fun conversation to watch.
I thought that was a really good conversation to include because it was like...
Yeah, agreed.
Throughout this entire movie, the negotiations about where Dido is allowed and where they kind of keep her hidden is very interesting. It's not entirely accurate. But it is interesting.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm excited to hear your take on like what was not super accurate. Okay. So then they grow up super happy, and it is she's almost of age, and they get a bad news letter. Her dad is dead. Her sweet dad who loved her forever and had super kind eyes.
Very sad.
Matthew Good has died off screen, everybody. And she...
After fathering several other children.
Yeah, he was all over the place with that.
He's
Yeah, we don't really ever know why he never brings anybody else home to the family manse. But
no, that is an interesting... and I think the movie makes the illusion that's because he loved Dido's mother.
Right.
I don't know if that's
Which
true,
who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Who can tell the minds of men?
Truly. Not even them.
Okay, so then she finds out also that she now inherits like 2,000 pounds a year and is now an heiress.
Yeah, that's like a serious...
That's not right?
She did not actually.
Yeah.
Elizabeth was the one who got a much bigger inheritance in real life.
Right.
But
and that's flipped in this movie.
Yeah, I think they did that for kind of like added drama.
Well, I think it was a really good device to show that the differences in inequity, because even though Elizabeth was the impoverished one in the movie, she still got entree to all the events. She was still sought after by dudes.
Yeah.
She was still a worthwhile member of society. Meanwhile, Dido has all these monies and everybody still thinks that she's less than.
Also, she's way better at the piano. Suck it, Elizabeth.
God, she's so good at that piano. Oh my God. Yeah, she should put on some concerts,
Yeah.
Okay, guys, people are coming to dinner, and they are men folks, and everyone's very excited about it.
It's very important when the menfolk come to dinner.
It absolutely is. And so we learn that when people come to visit, Dido does not get to go to dinner. She has to wait until they do the parlor times with the brandy and the sherry and stuff that time of the night.
Yeah. So this is the part where I thought that was interesting because we definitely do have record that Dido dined with the family.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wait, like
now,
casually or also when people came about?
Yes, that is. I need to go back and look at the letter. There is a letter from an American man who was visiting Lord Mansfield, and he wrote about Dido.
Okay,
and that is
I'm sure that was
the,
charming.
Well, it wasn't the best, but it's one of the often cited sources about Dido because he describes the way she looked and talks about her joining them. I think it might be after dinner, but
that's what it sounds. If I'm remembering you include the letter in your book, right?
Yes, I think that. But she definitely did dine with the family. She sat with the family in their church pew, which they show at one point, which was a big deal. So what this American man was saying in his letter was like that the family was overly familiar with Dido.
Right. Yes.
And he was like, he was appalled at the way that she was treated, which in his mind was too kindly.
Right.
And he talked about how she and Elizabeth walked around the garden with their arms entwined.
Right.
Yes. And then we see that so beautifully depicted in the painting. So I think to make it as big a deal as they did in the movie, I thought was maybe like a misrepresentation.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess...
I don't know. Maybe.
The neat thing about it is that she's talking to her uncle, who she calls Papa or Papa.
Yes.
And she's like, Papa, I'm rich now. I've got all these monies. Why can't, doesn't that mean I get to sit with all the people for dinner now? That surely means something. My station has changed. So I think it's neat because it shows, she has a relationship with him where she can ask very blunt questions like that. And he sort of litigates it with her. He's like, I think what he says is, there are social things that we have to adhere to. And so you can join us when no one can make any defensible objections.
Right. He's very legalistic in the way he talks about it. And it's like, come on, dude, this is like someone you love.
Right.
And I think that's obviously something that you see him struggle with.
Absolutely.
The movie,
absolutely.
That he is a man who takes the law very, very seriously. And
very seriously.
Sees the way it affects someone he loves.
But also thinks about loopholes like a lawyer.
Right. He's like, oh, well, this is why it's okay.
Right.
But I think it's frustrating because you're like, this is just that thing where men are like, oh, well, now that I'm the father of a daughter, I understand how women feel. And it's like, what the fuck?
Totally. As if you can't access your humanity other than...
Well, and there are shades of that in Mansfield. It's like, dude, you couldn't access your humanity and know that slavery was reprehensible before this? That's
absolutely.
That's not cool. And the thing that I think many, many people have been pointing out, especially recently, is that people knew slavery was wrong. It is not like everyone was like, this is totally chill, guys. What? No. There were anti-slavery conferences all the time. And some of those were fucked up because some of those people believed in the noble savage myth and other bad stuff.
Yes.
I'm just... Yes. The idea that people were like, oh, it's chill to own other people is not real.
Right.
There were always people who knew that was very wrong.
Right. Absolutely. In every iteration of slavery all over the world. So, definitely. Okay. So now, so they're at dinner and this absolutely... she's awful. She's awful throughout the whole thing. There's no character growth. There's no anything. She's the mother of these two fuckwads who are there.
She's a true, Cinderella evil stepmom character. Yes. She's just very villainous.
She absolutely is. And she talks about, because the uncle is the supreme judicial leader. I don't know.
What is he? The Lord. He's the Lord Chief Justice. I like that better. But I think we should go with Supreme Leader of
No
Legal.
Worries. So he's the supreme judicial leader of the land. And there's been an appeal from a lower court by some insurance agencies, and it's called like the Zong affair or the Zong case. So he is the person who's making the final decision.
Yes, which is a super important, if you're looking at a timeline of the actual abolition of slavery.
Right.
The Zong case is really important because it was very widely publicized.
Well, yeah. Okay. So if you're looking at the timeline of not the abolition of slavery in England, but Britain no longer doing the slave trades.
Sure. No, there's absolutely
they could still
slavery
own them
in
for
England
a long time.
For a long time. And Mansfield wrote the actual decision that outlawed slavery in England. Even after that, there were still slaves in England.
Yeah. Yep.
Even if it was outlawed, people were still bringing them there. There was still slavery in England. There were still enslaved people.
Right.
And it took much longer until it was truly, like, completely systemically abolished.
Right.
But the Zong case is kind of, I don't know. I think for a lot of, like, on a lot of timelines, especially in relation to, like, what's going on in America, in the United States, they're kind of, it's often, like, in tandem with that. So
okay. So the Zong case was this judicial case that went all the way up the courts of England because
all the way
to the Supreme one, and so it was this Middle Passage slave boat that showed up at a slave port in Jamaica and said we were running out of water, and so we had to. They drowned all the enslaved people.
They murdered enslaved people.
They murdered all of them. And they wanted to collect the insurance on it. And so originally it sided in the favor of the traders because they were like, you got the insurance, your quote unquote cargo was, all the people were murdered. And so, then the insurance people were like, oh, it's a lot of monies, though. It wasn't like, oh, you guys killed all those people. It was like, there's so many monies.
No, that's a real horrific part of this case. It wasn't being fought on the basis of a human rights violation that had occurred or a mass murder. No. It was a fight,
and it wasn't decided that way either.
It was not.
Yeah. So anyway, he's currently looking over the case to be like, should I side with the slave traders or should I side with the insurance company? And he's looking at the details of like what happened on the boat and all of the evidence to try to figure out what to do. And everybody is sort of waiting, breath abated, for his decision because it's going to impact a lot of economic issues in Britain. And that's what this fucking bitch is moaning at him about.
Right. And you can see various people trying to exert that argument against, encourage him to think about the economy. And you're like, oh, that's so fucked up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Start to finish. Super fucked. Yeah. Okay. So Dido's waiting outside, like way, way outside in the yard, the garden. And she hears a dude walking through the brush. Scary. It's an alarm. And so she runs inside and she's like, there are poachers out there. Ah! And then this super foxy guy walks in, you guys. Mm-hmm. And he immediately identifies her as a person with agency who deserves respect. And he
calls her the lady of the house.
Oh, yeah, he does.
He tells the servant, I believe I disturbed the lady of the house. And I fucking love that.
Oh,
you're exactly right. It's this immediate moment of she belongs and I'm going to give her respect. And you're just like, yes.
Oh, it's such a sexy hot. Normally in a romance on Heaving Bosoms, we say this is the moment that he identifies her as a sexy woman, which is probably also true. But chiefly, he identifies her as a person with agency who deserves respect.
Yeah, it's pretty hot when that happens.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah. So she turns around and she's like, sir, we have not been introduced. And he's like, oh, geez, that's weird. I was trying to do it good and I did it bad. So then he awkwardly looks at the servant and he's like, please tell the lady who's within hearing distance that I am sorry. And I needed to give you this letter from my dad. So then he fucks off, and then it's after dinner, and she gets to meet all the people now. She gets to be in company. So they walk in, and the mother is awful under her breath.
Yeah.
She's saying terrible things about like how shocking her complexion is and all the bullshit. And one of them is like into it. One of the boys, the brothers, his name is Oliver. And he's like, she is an exotic flower.
And he's another, I fucking hate when people call people of color exotic, number one.
Hate it.
Number two, he's another dude where you're like, oh, you're here! Bro!
Yes!
It's an English period piece and you're here! Like, what is his name?
No idea. No idea.
But I like
yes, he is that guy that you're like, oh, it's that guy. Yes.
He's hot. He's wearing a bad wig in this, but he's hot.
I think his name is Sam something. Like, he's fine. I don't know. He's fine.
Is he Grantchester?
Come again?
Is that Grantchester? Do you have you have you ever watched Grantchester?
No, I haven't.
That's the sound I make for Grantchester. It's about a fucking sexy priest. It is totally. Is it him?
Oh, okay.
Sydney Chambers. James Norton. Yes. Oh my god.
James Norton. Yes.
If you like...
I do. If you're asking if I like a sexy priest.
Well, a sexy priest, yes. But like gentle mystery shows.
Oh,
like
love that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a British one. It's called Grantchester. Everyone go watch it. I'm... Oh my god. He's the sexiest priest.
Yeah, I'm into it. Okay, Grantchester. Writing it down right now.
One of my friend Rebecca Weatherspoon. Oh, amazing romance novels. We watched the entire...
Love.
Like 3 first seasons together. And then every time Leah would be like, what's going on, guys? We'd be like, fucking Amanda. Which if you watch the show, you will understand.
Yes, please.
She was like, for 2 months, all you guys would talk about was fucking Amanda. We're really obsessed.
I love it. I love everything about that.
Sorry, just snorted.
No, that's perfect. Welcome to the club.
Grantchester, do it. Watch it. Get into it.
Oh, I'm into it. Okay, so Grantchester, James Norton is here. Oliver, his name is Oliver. Yeah, and Englandtimes Malfoy is also here.
Englandtimes Malfoy?
Yeah.
Dude, what's up?
Yeah, he is a hero.
He is pasty.
Boy, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like vampiric.
And I don't know if it's the makeup that they put on him or the lighting that's going on, but he does not look like he's gotten much sun in his lifetime.
Yeah, he doesn't look well.
No.
And honestly, I think all of those were choices made by the production team, and all of them were perfect choices.
Really amazing to see the way good people are depicted in this movie, and then the bad people like are bad, and I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so now the Oliver, the sexy hot one, is like, wow, she's pretty. And Englandtimes Malfoy is like, she repulses me, essentially.
Yeah, he's like super racist.
And then they have this gross rapey talk that is, wow.
Yeah.
It's a big terrible.
It's a no for me.
Yeah. And essentially it's like, we don't marry women like Belle. We marry, I think the literal words he uses is pure English rose, which is so many levels of terrible. So the mother can tell that Oliver is intrigued at the least. And so she's like, hey, this might be a fun thing that they have a black lady of the house walking around here, but I'm not going to invite this black lady into my house. So don't get any marriage ideas. And Oliver asks if she will play the piano after Cousin Elizabeth. And she's very worried because she's like, I don't know if I am allowed to. Like, it's this moment where she looks at her papa and she's like, is this okay? And then she slays it dead.
Yeah. She's like, suck it.
Yeah. She's so good.
Awesome with the piano.
Nails
And it's especially in contrast No offense, Elizabeth, but her singing was a little, insipid, one might say.
Yes.
And then Dido's just like, damn, I'm good at the piano.
Yeah. So then Aunt and Uncle have a chat because they're like, they can tell what's happening in Oliver's brain. And they're like, especially with her money now, we don't want her to fall victim to like abusive dudes with bad intentions.
They're worried.
Yeah. So then she sees a portrait artist knocking a canvas together. And she figures out that the portrait artist is there for her and Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And she has a little mini freak out. And I get it, because the only things she's ever seen are like Black people just being in super subservient positions to the white people who are also in the portrait. And it's terrible.
I think this is one of the most important scenes in the movie.
Ooh.
Honestly, because what they decided to do is let Dido have a choice about whether or not she's going to be painted. Like, she engages in a conversation with her uncle where she could say, like, no, I refuse to be painted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And it shows a level of trust between Dido and her uncle, where she trusts that the way that he has her best interest at heart and he wants this portrait of the two of them, and he will honor her and not disrespect her by positioning her in a way where she's below Elizabeth.
Most definitely.
And that all happens in this like instantaneous, it's so quickly.
And it's so, there's no exposition involved. You really just have to read between the lines of like cut off sentences and, explanations on behalf of the uncle and stuff. And it's a really beautiful, very authentic feeling conversation, complete with like a little bit of familial shorthand that was just gorgeous to me. But the other important thing about this scene is that she walks in and Mr. Davinier is there. He's the brute that wasn't introduced to her and tried to talk to her earlier and knows that she's a sexy, agent-filled person who deserves respect. And he's there. And so
what's he doing there?
Oh, hey. So she walks in and she's trying to have this like very vulnerable conversation with her uncle. And this fuckwad is there. And so she's like, hello. Oh, no. And he's like, oh, we've sort of been introduced, but I guess we have formally now.
Oh, he's so sassy.
He's so sassy. I know. He doesn't know his place, and I really like that about him. Mm-hmm. So she's like, why are you having a portrait made of me? Like, you're going to have me painted next to Elizabeth? And the uncle looks at her and is like, yes, next to her, as you always are. And it's totally gorgeous. But then Mr. Davinier is like, ugh, you'd think that a lady would be honored to be painted with a schmata. And she's like, you'd think that a gentleman would learn how to be a gentleman and not be a dick. And he's like, gah. And this is in my notes where I say, is this an enemies to lovers?
It kind of is. Well, they definitely don't start off as like best BFFs. Yeah. That's very funny.
Yeah, it's so good. Okay, so then she overhears the conversation because the uncle is like, hey, I need you to take these, like, please stop talking about the portrait. I want you to do the portrait. If you want to, that's great. And if not, we can chat about it later. And then he's like, can you take those books back to the library? Which sets up her comfort and the way that she is welcomed in his office. So she picks up these books and she overhears the conversation. It's essentially an interview to have Davinier be a law apprentice, is how I'm going to say it. Or do you have a better wording for that?
No, I think that's a good description.
Yeah. And then Davinier brings up the Zong case because he's of the mind that the law should help make the world a better place. And the uncle's like what? And he's like, that case where all the people were drowned, that one. And then the uncle, as she's walking out, is like, Dido, do you think that I should accept Mr. Davinier as my pupil? And she sort of gets this deer in a headlights look and then just fucks off. She doesn't say anything.
I like, though, that, like, there's this moment where his employment, like, hangs, like, she has power over it. And I love that she has this moment of power over him.
Me, too. Yeah, and he's not at all outraged that the uncle would ask her this.
No,
and it's such a good it just like encapsulates the way that he views both women and Black folks as equals automatically.
Right.
And it's just so sexy hot.
I think like one of the things that's so cool about like the character that they've made of Divinier, because that's not real. That's not the real person at all.
It is in my mind though. This is canon. This is historical accuracy.
This is real
in my brain.
But what they do is give him all these moments where he reflects back to Dido that like she is exactly where she's supposed to be. And like this idea of does she belong?
Yes.
And he just accepts her where she is, like as the lady of the house, in her uncle's office, coming into the court, like in all these different places where maybe you wouldn't think she would be. He always accepts her there.
Oh, he's always like, you're late. I wish you had been here before.
Yeah, I've been waiting for you. It's
what took you so long?
And his face whenever he sees her, he's just like, oh. Which would also be my face if I saw Gugu walking towards me.
I mean, yeah, she's a very, very, very good-looking human.
Yeah.
Understatement of the century. Okay, so then she goes back into the portrait hall and she's worrying over the portraits again. And he comes out and he's like, hey, way to have a bitch's back in there. Like, why didn't you help me out? And she's like, it wasn't my place.
Yeah.
And he says, well, your silence certainly spoke volumes. And so they have this whole talk back and forth. And she asks him a bit about the Zong case because in this movie, she's never heard of it before. And he gives her like the broad strokes story. And then he finds out that she's still not dining with the family in the movie, even for like a casual family dinner. But then the aunt offers him a seat at the table and he's like, oh no, I'm going somewhere else. And he looks at her and he's like, twice now, I've seen you not eating with your family. What the fuck is this? And she's like, yeah, you would think it's really fucking weird that a clergyman is allowed at the table, but yet a lady at the house isn't, huh? And he goes, is that another way to remind me of my place? And she goes, no, that is a statement of mine. Oh,
I love that because it's like, dude, it's not all about you.
Yeah.
Like, I am telling you something about myself.
Right.
You just think it's some reflection on you, but it's actually like I'm sharing something.
You just got a little bit of a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. And yet it's totally understandable that he would have that insecurity. I think that it's kind of neat that his character is insecure around her character because I think it's cool that he views her as a higher up than him.
I do think it's a really interesting like choice to make him the son of a clergyman and wanting to go into the legal profession.
Right.
In real life, Dido married a man named John Davigny, who we have historical documentation that he was a house servant.
Oh, okay. Oh.
So she didn't marry like a lawyer or someone with a profession like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she married someone who was definitely of a lower class.
Yeah.
Elizabeth married a much more well-off man, and her children, like, you could see it in the way Dido had 2 sons and Elizabeth had 2 sons, and they just had very different lives.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is a cool choice. I thought that at least he would be, like, the profession would be accurate. But, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
It's much more narratively.
Yeah, because, like, they're fighting together for this, like, outcome.
Right.
And they both have this, like, vested interest because he has this vested interest in the law, like, making things right in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then he takes off because he's like, you just talked about how lowly I am. I'm going to go now. And she walks to her room because, as Bea said, it's not all about him. And she goes to her room and there's this beautiful, heartbreaking scene where she sits at her mirror and she sort of tries to like rub the pigment out of her skin and like cries.
Ugh.
And, you know, you can see she's having this crisis of like, I don't fit anywhere and it's all because of my skin color. It's
really kind of horrible.
Yeah, and also
I don't know if I love
very
that.
authentic.
Yeah,
no,
I don't know that it doesn't feel authentic. I would say I, as a white woman, feel uncomfortable making a Black woman feel so bad about her skin color. But
oh yeah,
I don't know that that's historically inaccurate, that she would feel that confusion. And I think they've like set it up in the story that very, very beautifully that moment would occur. It just is so sad to watch it. Oh God.
Oh, it hit me right in my soul, this scene.
Yeah.
Oof.
And I guess it seems in such contrast to me, I would say, to the scenes where we see Belle getting her hair done. There's two different scenes. When in the very, very beginning, we see a woman gather her hair up and put it up on top of her head when she's a little girl. And then later, we see Mabel, the Black servant, offer to help Dido do her hair and show her how to brush it so that it doesn't hurt. And both of those scenes are so tender and beautiful. And you see Dido realizing how beautiful she is and how special she is and how beautiful her hair is. So it's just such a marked contrast to see such a sad scene where she doesn't find herself beautiful. And it's tough to watch.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I do also love that the film gave her the breadth of that experience. Like, we got the layers that make up her experience, the good, the bad, and the in-between.
Totally. It doesn't flatten her experience. It's not like it was all great, it was all bad. Like, no, you get to see Dido in a lot of different situations, having a lot of different reactions to it. And I think that's really cool, as you said, to see such a wide variety.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then he's being a law pupil and he's talking to the uncle about, the evils of slavery and how this shouldn't be an issue of fraud. This should be a human rights issue. And the uncle being like, I'm going to do what the law requires of me. May the heavens fall, but I'm still going to work within the laws that are currently on the books, which is that slavery is legal. Yeah, it's a rough, but also it's a real.
Also, both my parents were lawyers, and I just had this kind of flash of lawyers talk and being like, oh, well, the law said fuck off.
Yeah, I know.
Fuck the law.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fuck the racist laws, especially.
Yep. Yeah, let's just change those racist laws and then we can do law stuff and it'll be still great.
Right, because there's so many other good laws.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so then he sees her sitting for a portrait and he gets a little goo-goo-eyed at her, and then he figures out that she saw him making eyes at her and so he tries to run away. And she's like, hey, I would like to chat with you because I would like to know more about this Zong case. And at first he's like, they sort of have this misunderstanding where she's like, I just don't believe that those people could be drowned the way that you said. I just don't believe it. And he's like, how disconnected are you from the world that you don't believe it? And she stops him and she's like, please just tell me the details, because otherwise, what does she say? You're reducing me to your entertainment or something? Oof.
I think she feels like he's kind of keeping stuff from her, only giving her the bare minimum details.
Breadcrumbs,
yeah. Exactly. And in that way, infantilizing her.
Most definitely. Yeah, so he tells her the whole thing, and she's obviously shocked and appalled, and sort of has a moment where she has to steady herself on the windowsill, and he gets really worried and he reaches out and he touches her hand, everyone. He touches her hand in this way.
It's a really good hand touch. I would say it rides, it is a la the hand touch in Pride and Prejudice. Just such a meaningful hand touch.
Oh, yeah, so good.
Yeah. It's really
and then
beautiful.
He gets fired because she's not supposed to know stuff.
Dude gets fired.
He gets super fucking fired. He's like, I will get my things.
I will get my things. And he angrily gathers his papers.
Oh.
I love an angry gathering of papers.
God, I love it so much. He's just smacking them together. And then he looks, he's about to open the door, and his sassy face looks back and he's like, I have one question for you, my lord, from the son of a vicar. And then he gets real and he's like, you have this biracial niece, do you value her more or less than the 30 pounds that the slavers are asking for each dead person that they murdered?
Because it's such an amazing, it's like
gut punch.
You have in front of you evidence that people in this world view other people as worth 30 pounds. People who look like your beloved niece. Do you think she's worth 30 pounds? And you're like, ah!
Yeah.
You feel everything. Because it's so fucked up. It's so fucked up.
Fucked. God, it's so fucked. And so he's like, hey, also stay away from my niece or I'll make your life a living hell.
Yeah, he's like, well, I think she's worth more than 30 pounds and she's worth more than you, bro. So you stay away from her.
Certainly more than you, Vicar's son.
It's like, wait, hold on. You're not morally superior to him. What the fuck?
He's grasping at straws.
Yeah, he is. He is. He's a drowning man. Will grab whatever is nearby.
It's true. So then they find out that they're going to go to town, London town, because Cousin Elizabeth is coming out and Dido is going to be in the vicinity, but she is not.
This is so fucked up. And not, I don't think historically inaccurate, but I loved the unflinching way we were shown this. And how frankly, every single person involved knows it's fucked up.
Yep.
And are trying
they're just swallowing it down.
Yep. Trying to justify it. Trying to deal with it the best way they can. Dido and Elizabeth included. But no one is like, this is right.
Yeah.
They're like, this is the way it is.
And it's so, it makes me feel so many different ways. Because I'm like, I guess congrats for not knowing it's right. But also fuck you for doing it.
Well, exactly. It's that's part and parcel for the way they treat Dido, where they're like,
yeah, it is.
Oh, well, we know this might make her uncomfortable. We're still going to do it. Like, fuck you.
Right. And then the uncle is like, and when you get back, you're gonna, I need you to explain this to me, B. She's going to be the lady with the keys, you guys. She's going to be the spinster with the keys, question mark, to the house.
Spinster with the keys. So, like, a word for it might be, like, chatelaine. Like, which is, like, a French word. Yes. House manager, housekeeper. It was a definite position, which, exactly like Aunt Mary, like an unmarried, older relative might, kind of have this elevated place in the household, but not outside the household, where they're kind of in charge of things. So, and I think what they're kind of indicating with that is like Dido's role as secretary.
Okay, but instead they're making it more of a domestic
they're
role.
Making it exactly into a more like
that makes sense,
housekeeper role. But it's more than that.
You are elevated with the family's trust.
Yes.
Like they obviously value you, but you still are not.
You're still working. That's a job.
Yeah. So what it indicated to me is the uncle basically telling her there's no hope of you ever marrying.
Yes. That is absolutely
a spinster role.
In the movie, what it is referencing and what he's telling her. That they're not sending her to London to find a husband despite her inheritance. And there's a little kind of flubbing going on because it's like if she was such an heiress, they would have definitely married her off. Like, so the movie kind of plays with reality there, but
that's okay.
It's fine.
I mean, worked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she looks at him and she says, "Are you punishing me?" And he says, he's like befuddled in this moment. And he says, "You are most cherished, most loved." And she hangs her head and leaves. And then she and Cousin Elizabeth like embrace and the cousin's like, "I'm so sorry." And it's a big sisterly moment, but it's also terrible.
Well, I think Elizabeth and Dido, we've seen them multiple times, like laying in bed together, kind of like dreaming about their futures and like who they'll marry and what will happen to them. And so this is just like a moment where you can see those dreams kind of like dashed. It's so sad. Yeah.
And a moment where you see them realize that they are on different paths for reasons they can't control. Oof, it's rough. So then in the carriage, we have a little bit of an Englandtimes feminist moment because the cousin's like, aren't you at least a little happy that you're like totally financially set up and you don't have to marry a man? Like, most of us don't have a choice. We're their property. This is what we have to do in order to have any kind of stability.
Yeah,
and be provided
I
for.
was like,
Right. Yeah.
Hold on, white lady. Thank you for your opinion here, but this is a black woman you're talking to. Like, let
right.
You know.
Yep.
It is exactly an Englandtimes feminist moment, but unfortunately, it's not a very intersectional one.
Oh, it super isn't. No, they had no concept of that. Okay, so then when she gets into the house, it's a big awkward because she sees a black servant. I think maybe it looked like for the first time in her life. And she has no idea like what to do with herself or how to look at this woman or how to ask her for things or like how to interact with her. And it's another one of those moments where she just has no idea where she fits.
Yes. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's another like, is that my role? No, because she's still like serving her at the table. And you can see her kind of steel herself.
Yes,
Dido,
absolutely.
where she's like, she's not sure what she's going to do about it quite yet.
Right. But then Mabel, this is where she offers to help her brush her hair. And, there's that, like, they look at each other in the mirror and Mabel's like, very kindly smiling at her while she's brushing her hair. And she says, my mom taught me how to do this. And, it's like,
it's a really beautiful moment because it's two black women on the screen together in a period movie, like having an emotional scene that's not like about slavery. I loved it. I wished the whole movie.
Me too. I wanted them so much more.
I was like, oh my god, I love Mabel. And I think it's beautiful that they show her, because Dido and Elizabeth's relationship is so important, and like this connection between them and them as sisters, and that Elizabeth is there, I think is really gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then they go and visit those stupid brothers, those terrible brothers.
The Ashford brothers.
The Ashfords, yes. And so Oliver is, rubbing up on her a little, not literally, but he's like sidling up and he's like, hey, can we go a walk-in? And Englandtimes Malfoy is like, aren't you afraid of what people will think? And I loved this moment because he thinks he's totally in the right. He thinks he's totally fine. And everybody, record scratch, looks at him. And then Elizabeth goes, what, pray tell, do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? I loved this because it was like Elizabeth's one moment where she was like standing, like there's other moments where Elizabeth turns into a bit of a fuckwad, an extreme fuckwad herself. Oh, yes.
And I wish she had like stayed on this beat where she's just like, fuck you all, this is my cousin and I love her.
Yeah, I know. But, she is a bit of a follower, which, there you go.
Yeah.
So they do go a walk-in and they're at Vauxhall with the pleasure garden. I think it's referenced later.
Mm-hmm. He gets some fireworks.
Yeah. So they have this whole date and he like takes her to the side and he's like, I'm utterly besotted with you. I think you're great. And she's like, oh, your brother seems to disagree. And he says, well, he's a fool who can't forgive your like mother's background the way that I can. Oh, it's bad. He says, like,
it's very revealing
like
of the true. Yes.
Yeah. He says your better half gave you so many good qualities. Ugh. I'm gonna forgive the bad part of your heritage. And she's and it's this moment of like, I love the way this movie shows microaggressions. Mm-hmm. Englandtimes microaggressions, right? Like now they would not be considered microaggressions, but this stupid guy has no idea he has said something terrible to her. He's so proud of himself for being so generous to her that he's, looking past these qualities and seeing the good. And it's this moment where she's like, I know he doesn't mean badly, but I need to extricate myself from this situation.
Well, and you can see her being like, this is the guy who like is showing interest. Okay, so this is a guy showing interest in me. Do I like say, no, that's not cool? Like, just kind of having a moment and then choosing
to look past, to just keep moving. Keep
it moving.
Keep it moving, everybody.
Yeah.
Whew. So she's like, there's this beautiful music. And they keep walking around. And then she sees Mr. Devinier, who comes over and he's like, hello, it is very nice to see you. And she's like, whoa, Mr. Devinier, I didn't expect to see you here. And then she has to introduce the two.
Oh.
And it's right after this moment where Oliver's been like touching up on her face and trying to be all romantic. And then Oliver obviously sees him as a rival. And then the moment he finds out he's a clergyman's son, he's like, oh, hello. Great to meet you. It's terrible.
But it's wonderful where you see the layers of privilege in this movie. Like, this guy's above this guy's above this guy's above this guy. And it's just like, it's very subtle, but they do a great job of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So then there was this whole scene felt really unsafe to me. Did you feel that in this scene? Like, I was so scared this whole scene because she gets, like, he sort of takes her away from her family. And I don't trust this guy.
Yes. It's, you don't trust him. And you're like, where is he taking her?
Yeah. And like, are his intentions good? Or is he just like his brother, only better at hiding it? Like,
exactly.
Is she okay right now? Oh my God. It was, ugh. So he's like looking up at the fireworks and he's very in awe of everything. And then she backs away very slowly and runs to go see Mr. Devinier again. And then the romance, you guys, is on. It is cranked up to a 12. So she comes over and she's like, I just wanted to apologize because I totally messed up your situation with my uncle and I'm so sorry. And he says, well, just not to make you feel bad, but if anybody saw us talking, my head would be on a platter. And then he sees, so she like pulls him over to a bush so that she can keep talking to him.
No.
And then he sees her family. So he grabs her by the small of her back and he like pivots her like in between the bushes. And then they're pressed up against each other. And
there's like a lot of shots of the hand like grasping
the hand
her.
And her décolletage pressed up against him and the way that she's like gasping. And then they're looking deeply into each other's eyes. And then there's like shots of like just their lips. And listener.
It's really good.
It is a big smoking hot. But then it gets even hotter. Oh man. So then they start talking about the evils of slavery. And he's like, I'm all about abolition and I'm working to make this happen. And then she says, it's not just injustice. It's like even worse than that. Oh, they look at each other and she says, I've never heard anyone who speaks like you. And he says, nor I you, Miss Lindsay. It is a big hot.
It's really sexy that this romance is so much about like them seeing each other for who they really are and like seeing past like him being the son of a clergyman and her being Black and not seeing, that's not right, not seeing past it, seeing that and
loving it
and loving that and like it's very sexy.
It's so hot and like guys, this scene was so sexy that like the only word that came to mind just like with their banter was sapiosexual, the sexual attraction to intelligence. And then I was like, wait a second. And I paused the movie and I Googled, is there a word for being sexually attracted to someone's morality? There is not. But they are sexy hot for each other's moral compasses, you guys. And I didn't know I was into that until this movie.
I think it's like really interesting that she is like, I love my family so much, and my family loves me so much. But they have like an off moral compass.
Yes, yeah.
They are making like incorrect moral choices. I still love them. They still love me. But this man is the first man I've met who is on the like true north path.
Yes. Uh-huh. Ooh, And so he's like, you got to go because people are going to miss you. But we meet at this tavern and you are welcome anytime. And I would love to see you, basically. And he's looking longingly with his eyes at her. Ooh, it's a hot. Okay. So then the terrible mother finds out that Elizabeth doesn't actually have any inheritance.
Ooh, bad news.
Yeah. So Englandtimes Malfoy is no longer interested in cousin Elizabeth. And then at breakfast, Dido is she's feeling her oats a little bit. She's feeling her social justice oats, you guys. And she's like, hey, you know, Mabel, that wonderful lady who just served our breakfast, is she a slave?
Just asks outright. She's like, Mabel, is she a slave? What? Everyone's like, wait, what?
Yeah. And they're like, no, And he's like, no, she's a free woman and she's under our protection. And then she goes, just like me, I guess.
Just like me, I guess. Like, literally, just like me. Think about it, guys. And they're all like, oh, God, fuck, she's right.
Yeah, but they're all like, absolutely.
Of course not.
I'm eating
never.
Look how poached this egg is.
Inside, they're like, oh, no, we're terrible.
Yeah, it's so true. So then we find out that Oliver wants to marry her. And we also find out that people are wondering if the supreme judicial leader's relationship with Dido is impacting his ideas about the case.
Right, which is not something that we really have any historical evidence of.
But it also makes a metric fuck ton of sense.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I think so, but it's kind of an interesting thing not to have any historical record of because he was making all these like crazy important legal decisions and had this
that's weird
in his care. But yeah, it wasn't like a thing that there's like evidence of questioning his what's the word my brain just turned off?
Oh, I know the word that you're thinking of.
Neutrality. Neutrality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the one.
And
good job.
Yes.
No, thank you. You got it. You did it. Oh boy. Okay. So then Oliver comes over and he tries to do a big propose, and she's so conflicted that she says, I cannot ... I cannot think of anything more wonderful.
Oh, it's just a moment where you're like, I don't know.
Yes, I was literally on my couch. This is one of the times where Michael like gave me a big giant side eye because I was like, say no.
Like Grantchester is hot. Yes. I get it. Grantchester is fucking hot. But just say no.
He is. Yeah, don't be a fucking Amanda, probably.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it and see if that's accurate.
Fuck you, Amanda.
Okay, so then she finds ship papers and finds that they had ample opportunity to get all the water they needed. They just didn't.
And this is the real evidence that was used in the Zong case. It is truly what there was evidence that there were multiple ports they passed where they could have picked up water. The argument was made that they had murdered people because they didn't have enough water. That was not the case. They murdered them because the way that they had this, it's so horrific when you truly talk about the details, but it's important too. The way that they had transported these enslaved people made them sick.
They packed too many in. They tried to, and so they got sick. And so they were like, if we show up to port with sick
enslaved people, we cannot sell them for as much. It is worth more.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what Davigny is really getting at when he says the thing about the 30 pounds, because he knows that Mansfield knows that these people were worth more dead than alive. And you know that that is wrong. You know that that is fucked up.
Right. Oof. So she takes these ship papers to Davigny. Poor Harry the driver. She's like, hey, Harry.
I love Harry. She just ropes Harry into all her schemes. And Harry's like, never again.
No, I know. And you can see Harry like look off in the distance and be like, motherfucker, I'm going to get fired. Here we go.
Let's go. Let's go.
So
love it.
He takes her to the tavern and goes and gets Davigny. And Davigny is like, he looks at the papers and he says, this is remarkable, but his eyes actually say you are remarkable. And then he says, this is going to put you in a terrible position with your uncle. And she says, what's the alternative? And she's the original whistleblower, you guys. It's just how it is.
Well, and once again, we're having this conversation of what is Dido's position? Where is Dido's position? Where is her place? Where does she fit into all of this? And she is saying, I'm making a choice. This is where I fit in.
Yeah. And like, I love the idea that she's like, I know that I want to be loyal to my family because they are my family, but I also need them to ultimately be loyal to me. And there is a correct decision in this case, and this needs to be out in the public. Oof. So then he asks her to go for a walk out behind the taverns. And I never thought behind
where
a
no
tavern
one can
could be
see them.
So sexy. Oh. So then she sees a painting of a black man kneeling in front of a white man. And she says that we're no better in art than we are in life. And he suddenly realizes why she was so worried about this portrait being made. And he's like, oh, God, I'm so sorry. I mocked you about that. And I'm such a turd. Gosh, I didn't know I was being such a turd.
But I love, like,
no,
how often do we see men apologize for something that they incorrectly assumed? I thought it was beautiful. Sex is great, but being told you were right is even better.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. So he looks her dead in the face, and in the most sincere voice in the whole wide world, he just says, I feel ashamed. And it is beautiful. So then they start talking about notions of freedom. And she says that she's been granted freedom twice, both as a black person and as a woman. And yet she's like, I feel like I have to have a husband of consequence because otherwise I'm not a lady, right? I'm not achieving what my rank is supposed to achieve. And then the phrase she says is, it seems silly, like a free Negro who begs for a master. And that line and this whole conversation just killed me dead. It was so well put. This was just gorgeous and tragic. And
I think she refuses to make it easy for him. She's like, no, you have to understand the reality in which I live. And you have to understand the choices, the difficulty in the choices I am forced to make.
Right.
And she just like is so honest, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it really, really is.
I mean, I truly believe that these two fictionalized versions live happily ever after.
Oh, right? Ooh, it's so nice. Because then he says the woman wouldn't be searching for a master if she marries her equal, her true equal, a man who respects her. And the look she gives him right after he says that is such a big swoon. Ooh, it's hot. And then she's like, I remember my father's eyes. He showed me so much love, even though I only knew him for a few hours. And your eyes remind me of him. And he's like, ooh, my eyes, huh? And she's like, the color, the way they look.
I loved it. It's such a romance novel moment where you've said too much and you have to take it back. It's so cute.
Oh my God. And he asks about her mother, and she says, I don't really know much about her except for the color skin she gave me. And he looks her dead in the face, everybody, and he says, well, then you know she was beautiful.
Yeah. It's like a real moment where you're like, he's not accepting her. He loves her.
No. Okay. All right, so then she's like, I'm engaged to that dude, that Oliver Ashford dude, Mr. Grantchester.
Yeah, she's like, remember. Oops, I should probably remember. Yeah.
Whoopsies. And he says, is it what you want? No. And she's like, well, he's amiable, and the only alternative is to replace Lady Mary in the house. And he's like, but she's a spinster. And she says, I know. But Papa didn't trust that I could achieve a marriage that would raise my rank or even equal it. And then he walks right up to her. He closes the distance between them. He closes the respectable distance, and he says, you are above reducing yourself for the sake of rank. And then he takes off his hat so that he can get even closer. And he says, I pray he would marry you without a penny to your name, because that is a man who would truly cherish you.
It's like
Bea, I died.
You
is my
think
ghost.
Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice is romantic?
Oh.
Watch Belle. I mean, that is romantic, but
Belle. But watch this too.
Oh my God.
This murdered me. I'm dead.
It's beautiful.
Okay, then it takes a big left turn because they're at a summer party. And the only way to describe it is that she gets cornered by the terrible brother there should probably be a trigger warning. We don't see it on the screen, but we see her face as he assaults her. He sexually assaults her.
It's horrible.
And it is horrible. I do want to say, however, that it's not a rape. That doesn't happen. But it's not a terrible grope.
There's a grope. It's not shown on screen. You just see her face, which I think is like a horrible, beautiful choice as well.
Beautiful, but terrible.
Terrible. And yes, it's like we were up here and now we're down here.
Oof. Yeah. And I mean, it's such a cruelly evocative juxtaposition that again felt very authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the casual.
I don't know. Maybe authentic's not the right word, but like it.
No, I think it just is realistic that this time period, there's just a lot of casual infidelity amongst the upper classes.
Well, certainly, yeah. Well, but also, I mean, I think one of the best lines in that whole scene is that she backs up and she says, "How dare you?" And he, with his perfect Malfoy eyes, and they don't blink. And he's got like veins throbbing in his forehead, and he says, "With ease."
Exactly.
And then he just joins the party again.
Yes, it's so revealing. Ooh. It's like, I could do... And you can see her realize if she marries the other dude...
That's what her life is going to be like.
That's her new brother-in-law. And it's just...
Yeah.
And that with ease almost like implicates the brother as well. I think, to me, it's like with ease. Like, this is what...
Like, who's going to stop me?
Yeah, not even
certainly not my brother.
No.
Yeah. Oof. Wow, you're right. But then we get a montage of her and Oliver getting to know each other, and you guys, they are super in love. So that's wonderful. And she's sneaking out all over the place. And that's the other thing we're finding out is that she's sneaking out so that she can go see him and like work with him.
Wait, not Oliver.
No, I'm so sorry. You're right.
I was like, wait, I missed that montage.
Davigny. No. You're right. You're totally right.
Davigny.
Yes. Okay, so then she finds out that her uncle is supposed to make a decision soon. And then the uncle sees her come home from one of these walks with Davigny. And like, then he goes and he gives a very poignant look to Harry, the driver. And like, the jig is up.
Oh, Harry is in trouble.
Oh boy, is Harry in trouble. And he knows it. Okay, so then we have this scene with Dido and Cousin Elizabeth because she's really sad because she hasn't heard a peep from that terrible Englandtimes Malfoy rapist. And so she's really worried about it. And Dido sits down and she's like, you know, he's obviously not a man of his word because he promised her in the movie that he would definitely be announcing their engagement soon. And then she says, I'm going to help you find someone. I'm going to ask Papa to use part of my inheritance for your dowry. And she's like, yay, now I can marry Englandtimes Malfoy. I'm so excited. And Dido's like, no, back up the truck. He's not a good man. And she says that he touched me in like an ungentlemanly way, which is devastating, but also wow. And then Elizabeth's like, he would never do that because you're beneath him.
Yeah.
Oh, and so she's like, I'm beneath him. Why don't you elaborate on that? And Elizabeth has a really hard time coming up with an acceptable thing to say. And so she finally comes out with you're illegitimate. And in this movie, Dido is not, when in fact Elizabeth is. So I mean, you can see on both of their faces that what she's saying is you're beneath him because you're black. But what she comes out with is you're illegitimate.
As you said, it's not accurate that the roles were reversed.
Right.
But fuck you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, fuck you. Yeah.
Right after she offered she was like, I will help you out financially. Like, seriously, fuck you.
Yeah. Okay, so then she goes to visit Davigny in the way that has become customary for both of them. But when she opens the door, it's her uncle. Dun,
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 dun.
dun.
He's there. He knows.
He knows.
So he sits in the carriage and like he lays in wait for Divinier to show up.
Oh.
And then, there is this big self-righteous fight that is so beautiful. So the uncle says, would you risk your rank and your reputation and our name for this dude who's ambitious and like a greasy pole climber?
Mm-hmm.
And Divinier is like, I super resent that.
He's like, dude, be nicer to me.
Yeah, he's like, you have to stop seeing the world as those above and those below and start seeing people as people. And then the uncle sort of fumbles around and he's like, well, you're engaged. And he's like, no, I'm not. My ambitious aunt, who only sees money just like you, wants that. But I want love. And then the uncle's like, you claim to love her? And he's like, oh my God, you guys, he shouts in his face. He says, yes, I love her with every breath I breathe. And then they make eye contact because this is the first declaration of love.
I love that this entire fight takes place in a carriage because carriages are for sexy times in romance.
Yes.
But this fight is so, because they're like all closed in together. It's so good.
Oh my gosh. It's so good. And so she's got tears in her eyes and she says, go, John, you don't deserve this. And so without a word, he leaves the carriage. And then the uncle looks at her and he says, you're ruining your chances with the only gentleman who will have you. Talking about Oliver. Oh my God. But then he goes home and he's ranting and raving and his wife very gently but sternly puts him in place.
Oh, yeah. Love her.
I loved this. Loved this. Because she's like, hey, everything he's saying sounds like a dude I used to know.
It's like, bro, Steph, remember when people are in love and they want to like help the people that they love? Like, remember when we were in love?
Right.
I mean, we're still in love, but remember when we were really in love and young?
Yeah. And also, do you remember when you were a little radical for the law profession? And he's like, yeah, but I never broke the rules. And she goes, no, you became powerful enough to change the rules. But you also got a head start. Like, oh, it's so good. And so she's like, she also says, it is possible that even you cannot fight change, my darling. Sometimes you cannot fight it because you are a part of it. And it brings him basically to his knees. And then she says, do you love her? And he says, as though she were created of you and me. And I sobbed. I'm sobbing in my living room. And he says, and that is why I won't see her diminished. And then I got really angry in my living room, you guys, because fuck the aristocracy.
It's so ingrained, you know, and I think that's part of what this movie is showing. Like, if you've been raised in a certain society with a certain set of values, like, undoing those values takes work, like actual work.
Right.
I think many people right now are facing that. And I think Mansfield is someone who thinks they've been doing the work.
Absolutely.
But what she's saying is, in your own home, you have not.
Well, and also, like, you think you have been doing the work in a certain framework. Like, you have to step outside of your privileged bubble and see what the work actually is.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of people, our listeners included, that are realizing that they think that they've been doing a lot of the work, you know, but there's always room to grow. I'm certainly one of those people. There's always room to grow and learn and be better.
I hope we're all those people. I think if you consider, if you're like, oh, I've done all the work, I'm good. Like, what the fuck is that? No, we're always.
I mean, congrats.
I guess. Like, wow.
But I don't think I want to talk to you ever again.
No.
We can't be friends.
Thank you.
Okay, so then they break off the engagement with Oliver. And the mother-in-law tells on herself because she's like, you know, this woman of unfortunate circumstances is breaking off her engagement to my gentleman's
we're
son.
Doing you a favor.
Right.
How dare you? It's
right.
No, you're wrong.
Oh, and it is this, one of the things I'm on record I love is a really awesome verbal takedown.
Mm-hmm.
And Belle takes this woman down and also her family. Like, in one fell swoop, she shows everybody how awful they are. Oh, it's just beautiful. So she's like, I'm doing this because you view my circumstances as unfortunate, but I cannot claim even a portion of the misfortune of those I most closely resemble. And then she says she doesn't want to marry into a family who would be ashamed of her, as she's been required to be ashamed of her own mother. And the quote is, her apparent crime to be born black and mine to be the evidence. Yeah. And so right before she flounces out of the room, she says she doesn't want to marry a husband who doesn't understand that basically forgiving her heritage is both unnecessary and without grace. Ooh. It's so good. Zing. Okay, you guys, the portrait is done. The portrait is done. And she's a prominent figure. Although I was looking at this movie rendition and like on first glance, I was like, it still looks like she's behind Elizabeth. It's like Elizabeth is facing forward and she's like, you know, off to the side.
I don't really understand why they didn't just use the real paint.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Or copy the real painting, because she has so much personality in the real painting that she is devoid of in the movie recreation.
Well, and I think that smile on her face in the real painting is like, it's just often referenced in mentions of Dido. It clearly like has reached through history and like touched a lot of people. And it's a really important part of the portrait, because as we saw earlier, they showed how Black people are depicted like kneeling or below white people and looking up at them. And instead, Dido is looking directly at the viewer and inviting them into the painting.
Yeah.
And with this mischievous smile on her face, which is just so engaging and sweet. So yes, I agree. They like kind of took that out of the painting in the movie. But
yeah, it didn't make any sense, because I was like, is she, I mean, I spent the majority of the beginning of this scene being like, is she okay? Are we okay with this painting? I don't know. Like, I was just waiting for her reaction. Whereas when I saw the original, I was like, oh, that is lovely. Like,
yeah, when you see the original painting, it's like, it's really, wow. Like,
yeah, it creates a very vivid idea of the subject's relationship, you know,
it is so clear that they are loving and connected, and
Dido looks so confident. It's great. Anyway, so she's really happy with it, and she's a little bit surprised that it's gonna be hung at the family estate. And the uncle's like, Dido, babe, what do you want from me? Like, I love you, and I've done everything I can within the structure of society to make sure that you know that you're loved, and I don't know what you want. And she's like, well, what if there wasn't those rules? You know, like our relationship, our true loving relationship, this portrait that you are going to hang forever in your family's estate shows that you are courageous and you have power in this moment, referencing the Zong case. And oh man, so now they go to the courthouse, you guys. Oh,
I love the way the portrait is shown before we see the outcome of the case.
Yes, absolutely. So there is a whole scene. We're going to sort of skip through it because he and Divinier have a big scene where once again, Divinier is like, this is about more than just the letter of the law fraud. This is about human rights. This is about Dido's life. This is about humanity. And you need to know that. And then, you guys, it's ruling day. He's going to rule now. He's ready. He's
wearing his wig. He's wearing his wig.
He's wearing his... Man, those wigs. They make me shudder. Like, those wigs, they just like look moth-eaten, you know?
This one in particular looked...
This one in particular was a little raggedy.
I was like, what prop warehouse did you pull that out of?
I know. Listen, he is haggard. He's been working hard. Everybody's been coming at him.
Yes.
Poor white man. So she sneaks there and she goes into the gallery, and it's this huge moment because the way that they phrase the speech, it almost sounds like he's going to rule in favor of the traitors. And I think it's a really good representation of the fact that he is still upholding that, like, this would be legal under certain circumstances, and he would he would rule that way under certain circumstances. But in this particular case, he can't, but also won't, I guess. You know what I mean? I think it does a really good job of not being like, and Mansfield, the saintly savior of all of enslaved people.
Which I think is like so important. It's like, this dude had a Black woman living in his house for years and didn't do jack shit. Right. So let's not like anoint him.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So then everybody's celebrating. He makes the right decision. And they go outside. Oh, well, she goes and she hugs John on the gallery floor, John Divinier. And then they go outside and she looks at her uncle and she's like, I came here all on my own. He didn't do anything to sway me.
He's innocent.
He's innocent. It was all me. And the uncle's like, I know. I love you. I know. And then she's like, and all I want is to marry him. And he's like, well, I still want you to marry a gentleman, so he needs an occupation befitting one. So, like, Divinier, why don't you come work for me? Which is apparently all fiction. Fine. It was a big inspire. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it is. That part appears to be fiction. But he may have worked for Mansfield. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? I certainly don't. And then when he leaves, Divinier looks at Dido and he says, can it be true? And she's like, yeah, I think my uncle's definitely going to give you a job. And he's like, no, can it be true that you feel like that for me? Because I cannot imagine a life without you. And then she looks at him and she says, I love you for all that you are and with all that I am.
It's very romantic. It's very romantic.
It's a big swoon. It's a big, I died. And then it brought me back to life. And here I am, you guys, happily ever after. Wow. B, you have brought me so many gifts this week.
I'm so
Thank you.
I'm
from the
so,
bottom
so
of my
glad.
heart.
I literally love when people discover Belle. Now, I will say,
yeah,
it's the best movie ever. The direct, like, and if you loved it and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go watch the director's other movie. Don't.
Oh, don't? Maybe don't. Okay.
There's one, I don't know about all the rest, but there is one where Amandla Stenberg falls in love with the Nazi, which is not great. Not great, everyone.
No, I hate that.
Hate it.
Nope. I'm sorry. There are few people in the world who do not deserve love, and Nazis are chief among them.
Yeah, that's a hard no for me. But
yeah,
I love talking about Belle. I love talking about Gugu's performance because it's fantastic. But the director is like a little controversial.
Okay, fair. Well, you know what? The director did a great job in this one instance.
Truly excellent work, and I just wish, in our conversations about Georgian and Regency period pieces, Belle was like talked about more.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea how this like wasn't on my radar. Like now, I'm really angry that I haven't had it in my life for. But now you
do, and you get to go spread it, and that's you can become a Belle evangelist like me.
Yes, I will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also going to be a Mad and Bad evangelist.
Oh,
you taught me so much about Englandtimes.
So
I know so
nice.
many more things.
I'm so glad. I really
about
love
Englandtimes.
This time period. I think it's like so fascinating for so many reasons. For me in particular, just the sheer number of women who are doing truly groundbreaking stuff in any number of fields is just so exciting. Like, as someone who loves history, it's like there's a cool one and there's another one and there's another one. It's just like there's a tidal wave of cool women to discover in the Regency period.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I want to ask you a little bit about your research and stuff in our Patreon interview. So
exciting.
That'll be really cool. Okay, so where can they find you? Tell them where they can find you.
I am at B Rose Koch on Twitter and at B Koch on Instagram. And I have a website that has some information. Not gonna lie, guys, I'm not like a super website pro. So we are working on it. And you can always find me at The Ripped Bodice.
All right. So, what's your lady love? Do you have a lady love for everybody?
I have so many lady loves.
Oh, yes, please.
I don't even know which one to pick. Friends of mine who have a company, they call themselves professional enthusiasts.
Ooh.
And I would like to also call myself, I'm a professional enthusiast about anything I like, I will just talk about forever. I think what I will pick is a recipe.
Ooh, yes, please.
It's actually so easy. And the feeling at the end. So it's a recipe for star bread. You can just Google star bread. But my favorite is Sally's Baking Addiction, her recipe.
Okay.
I've made it now for like a bunch. I made it for my boyfriend's mom for her birthday. And I like, you can pick any filling. So you can do like cinnamon sugar or jam or Nutella. But my personal spin on star bread is to put sprinkles, rainbow sprinkles.
How fun.
You like twist the bread up so then you like see all the sprinkles, and it just is like, makes me sick. I've been baking like a lunatic during quarantine. Like every single day I bake something. And star bread has become like my like signature thing.
How fun. All right, cool.
So bake some star bread. Tag me.
Go.
I would love to see it.
Yay. Okay, mine is a little movie that's on Netflix. It's called Seriously Single. It is this South African rom-com, and it's about this woman who desperately wants to find a man, and there's a lot about it that's like a bit, it feels a little bit like throwback rom-coms, but it's so funny. The best friend is played by Tumi Morake, and she is an absolute delight. And I've since checked out a bunch of her comedy stuff, and it's just wonderful. But and there is an HEA involved. Actually, there's a couple of HEAs in my opinion. It's so good.
This sounds delightful. I'm going to go watch it tonight.
Sometimes the humor's a little bit on the cheesy side. So you do have to I personally had to look away a couple of times because that's not really my style. But the whole thing, it's such a lady love. It's such an inspirational thing. And there are multiple HEAs in all the best ways. So check out Seriously Single. It's on Netflix. Okay. So.
Okay. Keep being a badass.
And love yourself as much as you love to hate Englandtimes Malfoy.
I do hate him.
I hate him so much.
I'm going to push him in front of a carriage.
Yeah, one of those clippity-clop carriages that goes so fast. All right. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a delight.
Oh, my God.
Oh,
wow.
All right.
Brain meld.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Hey, you. Yes, listener, you. Are you loving the show? If so, please leave a rating and review in your podcast app. The 90 seconds you take to say something nice not only helps new people find the show, but it makes me super smile over at HBHQ. Also, I've had a few people ask, and the answer is yes. We are still doing the 5-star bribe. If you leave us a review with 5 stars, then we'll do whatever book you want. We're real deep into the list, though, so it might be a while. Lilas! Okay, back to the show.